Hi, my name is Nina with Nina Suggs Watercolor. So do you ever struggle to know what technique to use when you have a highlight in your watercolor painting, but you don't know what technique to use to get that particular kind of highlight? Sometimes they have soft edges and sometimes they have crisp, hard edges around the highlights. I have 4 different techniques that I'm going to share with you today, and 2 of them have subtle soft edges and 2 of them have very crisp, hard outside edges around those highlights. And as an added bonus, I'm going to take one of those highlights that has hard, sharp edges around it and show you how to soften it up a little bit. So let's jump on in and start painting. So I have 4 circles out here. The first one we're going to look at is masking. So I have some masking fluid. The brand that I like to use is by Holbein, and I have used this for years and I absolutely love it. I've never had an issue with it, so I would highly recommend that you use this brand if you don't already currently have one that you love or you've never used masking fluid before. A couple of the things that I really like about it is the fact that it is blue, so when I put it on my paper, I know exactly where I've put it, which is very beneficial for me, and it's never stained any paper I've ever used it on. I know that I've heard people complain before that their blue masking fluid stained their paper. I don't know that they were using this brand. I don't think they were, but I've never had an issue with it. But it's really a good brand and I love it and I would highly recommend it. Then I have skipping over. So in this one, we'll wet the whole circle and we will paint around the area that's going to be highlighted. This one, we're going to paint the whole thing blue and then we'll use a scrubbing brush to lift out the highlight. And then finally, on this one, we're going to paint around it. So we have a hard edge or a sharp edge highlight, a soft edged highlight, another soft edge highlight, and another crisp hard edge highlight. So we'll begin with the masking. So I'm just going to take my brush and put some plain water down inside this circle. Get everything nice and wet. The color I've decided to use today is Phthalo Blue in the red shade, and it is M Gram, or let's see, I take that back. No, yes, it's the M Gram brand. I use M Gram and, well, my mind just went blank. What's the other brand that I use? Daniel Smith. Those are the 2 brands of paint that I gravitate to the most. M Gram being my favorite, and Daniel Smith being my next favorite. Well, let me just put it this way. They're both my favorite. I don't love one more than the other, but I love them both. Okay, so we have this circle painted in with just some water. And I'm going to take some of this blue and get it mixed up with some water here. And then we'll just paint this whole circle blue. And the great thing about using masking fluid is that it's protecting your paper, so you don't have to worry about painting over the top of that area, because once this paint is dry and we take off that masking fluid, that part of the paper is going to be crisp, clear, and white. All right, we've got this one all nice and painted in. And we will just move on to the next. I'm not going to worry about making sure that my washes are all nice and neat because that's not my focus for this particular little tutorial that I'm sharing with you. Now, next we're going to do the skip over method. So just like we did with the first circle, I'm going to put just clean water in here and go all the way around the whole inside. And you can tell that I didn't get my brush rinsed out very well because there is still a little bit of blue in there, but that's okay. Okay, so what I want to do here, I have a lot of water on my paper. I don't want to put color in there just yet because with this much water sitting on the surface of my paper, if I put my paint on there, it is going to just splurge out all over the whole circle. And I want to paint around that highlight. And I don't think I mentioned it, but on each of these, I want my light source coming this direction from this upper right-hand corner. So each highlight is going to be in the same, relatively the same area on each. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sit for a minute and go ahead and put my water on this one. Now this one, we're going to lift it out. So just like we did with this first circle, I'm going to put water in here first. And this is typically how I start a lot of my paintings in sections, is by putting water down first and then putting my color in on top of the water. And sometimes I don't. It depends on the element of the painting that I'm doing and what look I'm going for. Just a lot of different variables will determine if I'm going to put water down first and then add paint, or if I'm just going to put paint right onto my dry paper. In this instance, I wanted to wet it first. Do you see how that blue just flew out over the cross of that paper? That's why I'm waiting for this water to sink in to the paper a little bit so that I have more control over where that where that paint is going to go. All right. So we'll get this one all painted in. And just like I said before, I am not going to worry about if my washes are all nice and smooth and pretty, because that is not, again, the focus of this tutorial. Okay, so for this last one, we're going to paint around where we want the highlight. So in this instance, I'm going to paint right on top of my dry paper. So I've got my blue, a good little puddle of it mixed up here, and I'm going to determine, okay, I know that I want my highlight to be relatively in this little area right here. So I'm going to just paint right around it, and I'm just, like I said, putting paint right onto dry paper. You can also put your water down first and then add your paint on top. Either way is going to be fine. But again, I guess it could kind of depend on what you're painting, how big the area is. But because this circle right here is not that big, I think this circle is 2 1/4 inches, it's not too big of an area for me to put a wash in wet on to dry and have to worry about getting hard edges or water lines or anything like that. Okay, so I've got those painted in. Now this one, let me come back to this one. I see a little puddle of water right there. I'm going to soak some of that up with my brush. Then I'll just dab it off on a tissue. It looks like the water has pretty much sunk into the paper for the most part. It wants to kind of crawl across the paper, so I'm going to be a little bit cautious and paint with some paint that's a little bit drier. See how I'm pulling from my actual paint right here and having that a thicker consistency rather than a watery consistency? Okay, you're getting an extra lesson in here. So that will help me to keep my paint going where I want it to go rather than where it necessarily wants to go. So I'm going to come out around this edge here. Whoop, circle right back around. I'm going to just keep an eye on how this paint is behaving. And I don't want my highlight back that far. And it doesn't need to be down quite that low, but I'm allowing the highlight to be larger than what it necessarily needs to be, so that if the paint does kind of creep into that highlight area, it's not going to completely close it in. Okay, so here we go. Now you know what I need to do next is I need to dry all of these. And then what I'll do is I'll come back and I will remove, well, no, I take that back. I had said I'm going to give you a little bonus. So a couple of things, well, okay, let me think about this for a second. How do I want to present this? Okay, I know what I'm going to do. On one side of this highlight, I'm going to use a brush and soften the edge. On the other side, I'm not going to. That way, we can take that masking fluid off and you can see how you can use this method. If you're going to use masking fluid, but you still want the edge to have a softness to it, I'm going to show you how to get that. Or if you want that highlight to have a crisp, sharp edge, I'll show you how that is done. Now we're ready to start working on these highlights some more. So when I stopped to let these dry, I'd said that we would make one side of this a soft edge and then let the other side be a crisp, hard edge. And this is the one with the masking fluid. I have two different scrubbing brushes right here. Sometimes they're called an eradicator. This is a small Rosemary & Co. and they call theirs an eradicator. And this is a Dick Blick scrubber and it's called a Wonder White. So I'm going to start out with my Rosemary & Co. brush first. And the way that you would tackle this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit closer what's happening. Okay, we're in focus. There we go. So I'm going to take this brush, I've gotten it wet in my water, and up along this outside edge, I'm going to
just rub back and forth. You can hear a little squeaky squeak where I'm touching that masking fluid, but I'm going to rub this brush back and forth right kind of on top of the masking fluid, but then letting the brush run off the side. Then I'll take my paper towel and just blot that up. So I don't know how well you can see on screen, but I can tell that that edge is softened somewhat. So now let's go ahead and take that masking fluid off. I'm going to use my little rubber cement eraser here, just pull that masking fluid up. And as you can see, this side of this highlight where we use the brush is a little bit more softened, and then this side where we did nothing at all is a nice crisp hard edge for this highlight, just like this one. So if you need that kind of a highlight, let's say you're painting something that's glass and it has direct light on it, you might possibly get a very crisp, bright highlight just like this. What if this was a marble and there was a light shining right on it? You might have that kind of light. And then again, it can also be a little diffused around the edges. You can come back with your little eradicator. If you want that edge to be even softer, then just get your brush wet and just rub right over that edge, and it'll lift a little more of that paint and make it a little bit softer. So now that we have softened this side with the masking fluid, let's soften this side after the fact. You can do that too. So I'm just taking this brush and I'm moving back and forth in a sawing type of a motion, but kind of in a circle at the same time. So there we go. That crisp, hard edge is now softened up. So we have a softer highlight. And then remember, this one is the one that we did where we just painted around it, or we skipped over the highlight. And then this one, we painted the whole thing, and we decided that we would just lift that highlight out afterwards. So I'm using the eradicator now. This brush from Rosemary & Co. has softer bristles on it. So if you want some subtle lifting back like this, it's perfect for that. But let's say you want to take this back all the way to a really bright white color. That's where the Blick Wonder White brush comes in really, really handy. The bristles are stiffer and you can pick up more, let me get my tongue and my brain in sync, pick up more of the color. Now, I will say this, in doing so, you're also going to disturb the surface of your paper. See that little piece right there? That's a little bit of the paper that has come up with the action of scrubbing this highlight out. Now, there are ways to smooth that back out. I will show you that sometime in another little video, but for today I just wanted to show you these different ways that you can get these highlights. So we had the masking, which created that crisp hard edge, and we softened it. We had the skipping over, everything was wet, and we just painted around the highlight. We just did this one where we lifted it after we painted the whole thing in, and then this one where we painted wet onto dry and left this crisp highlight. So I hope that you learned something in this little lesson today. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you have any questions, leave those down there too. And again, my name is Nina with Nina Suggs Watercolor. Hope you have a great day.